Hello all, good afternoon and welcome everyone to our Rhode Island Commercial Appraisal Board of Realtors. Today we have a great panel discussing the current and future state of Rhode Island's commercial real estate market. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge our sponsor, Sweeney Real Estate and Appraisal. They're a full-service commercial brokerage and appraisal firm serving Rhode Island and Southern Massachusetts. Thank you, Sweeney team, for your continued support. Today's program, The State of Commercial Real Estate in Rhode Island, is the third in a series of monthly programs Reichebor is presenting as a resource for any practitioner working in the commercial real estate space. In December, we had Advanced Structures and Strategies in 1031 Exchange, presented by Patty Flowers, Vice President with Commercial Property Exchange Services in Boston. And last month, we had SBA 504 loans presented by Jim Turney, Vice President of Commercial Lending with Ocean State Business Development in Providence, who is in our audience today. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that we're always happy to welcome new members. So either as a realtor or an affiliate member. So if you have interest, reach out to any of us or go onto our website, www.reichebor.realtor. It's my pleasure to introduce our 2021 Reichebor president and tonight's moderator, Tom Sweeney. Tom is the principal of Sweeney Real Estate and Appraisal, one of Rhode Island's 5 commercial real estate firms by volume. Since 2015, Tom and his team have been recognized by CoStar as power brokers and has been named the best commercial real estate brokerage and commercial real estate appraisers by Lawyers Weekly 3 years running. Tom is a longstanding Warwick Rotarian, a member of the Friendly Sons of St. Patrick, and the president of Reichebor. In 2020, Tom was nationally recognized for his work with the Rhode Island Boys and Girls Club Alliance and was named a leader and achiever by the Providence Business Network. News. So without any further ado, here is our president, Tom Sweeney.
Thank you, Jack. I want to welcome everybody here this afternoon. My name is Tom Sweeney, as you know. We hope to present to you an overview of the Rhode Island commercial market. In our effort to do that, we have enlisted what we feel are some of the best experienced and most knowledgeable and recognized market leaders throughout the state. We have Mike Alves from KW Commercial, Steve Flotchbart of Cushman & Wakefield, Hayes & Sherry, Karen Catuno from Abbott Properties, and Steve Kirby of Kirby Real Estate, to give you an insight as to what happened over the last year and where they think we might be going. I would like to start the program by giving an overview of the statewide market and then allow each of our panelists to expound on a deeper level into their specific submarket. As we begin to move forward in 2020, we have to look back at the past year and realize that there were challenges brought on by COVID, but overall the market appears to have weathered the storm for the most part. When we look at overall activity in the Providence, Rhode Island market, based on CoStar statistics, the Providence market has seen an overall increase in sales volume of $1.3 billion, which represented a 40.6% growth over the previous year. This growth was across 1,143 sales with a total asset value of $41.28 billion. When this is compared to overall sales growth nationally, which was down almost 32%, it would indicate that the market here is still relatively strong and in good condition. But then there is the COVID factor that has impacted each segment of the market differently. In the industrial segment, users are looking to refine their distribution channels and to meet the demands of e-commerce. Jack, if you could go to the next slide. The issue in this market is that inventory is very low, and both users and investors are beginning to look at repurposing existing buildings and or ground up development. The demand throughout this time last year has remained constant in this segment. The retail segment has been the most fluid, with impacts varying across the board. Depending on the type of customer interaction a retailer has, significantly impacts how they can address a changing marketplace. Added on top of this are Department of Health regulations, which can and have changed throughout the time period, which forces businesses to both comply and adapt to those changes. The increases in e-commerce has and will continue to impact demand for brick and mortar retail space, though we haven't seen significant drops yet. Finally, in probably the most fluid is the office segment of the market. We don't know where the fallout is yet, as most leases are in the process of turning, and it will play out as we shall see over the remainder of the pandemic. Space requirements potentially changing based upon how office users determine their space needs. This will both impact downtown and suburban office users, as well as investment in owner-occupied properties. There will appear to be potential for high vacancies and increasing supply, but we won't know that until we get back to what is considered normal. I think the biggest thing in this market is that people have to be able to adapt and change and come to a realization that nothing is normal until we figure out what normal is. I would like to turn it over to the panel at this point to give a more focused discussion of where we are and where we are going. I would ask if you have any questions that you haven't already submitted to Jack, that you please use the chat function on this app, and we will try to answer as many questions as we possibly can at the end of the presentation. So with that being said, and with basically a very short overview, let me first introduce Mike Alves from KW Commercial, who will give us an overview of the East Bay, East Providence, and neighboring Massachusetts markets. Mike has been involved in real estate since 1986. He is a founder of KW Elite Commercial Realty and a co-owner of KW Leading Edge Realty. He is currently the KW Commercial Northeast Director. Mike is a past president of the Rhode Island Commercial Appraisal Board. And with that being said, Mike, I turn it over to you.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Hope everybody is hunkered down. It's always nice to have the Zoom to be able to get in front of everybody. I'm old school. I'd love to be in front of you, but that's changed over the past year, as everybody knows, even in our business. So I'm going to go over basically Warren and East Bay first. As you can see, I got a little, just a little short little PowerPoint there. I'm going to go right down the bullet points. So in Warren and East Bay, the developmental effect on downtown, more so in Warren. I'm a longtime resident of Warren. So in Warren, Bristol, East Providence is more city, so it doesn't get as impacted as it gets more city impacted than town impacted. The development, we've had some developmentals that have happened in Warren and in Bristol in the residential factor of larger mill buildings and a lot larger developments of residential, which has kind of impacted the center of towns in these towns. Some of the things that have kind of morphed off of that is, so one of the biggest examples would be the mill building that Brady Sullivan, the Tourista building in Warren, that impacted Warren downtown a lot. They put in actually commercial and retail office below and put residential above. So that kind of affected the downtown location. So some of the things that have happened was collaboratives. So one of the collaboratives is office collaboratives. So with COVID coming in, a lot of the larger offices needed to just get smaller offices, a lot of people working from home. So these office collaboratives are just larger office spaces, and they just basically have the service of a front desk person, and they have a lobby, bathroom, conference room, and one office. And a lot of people are using those collaboratives throughout this COVID to get through it. Another kind of collaborative in Warren is kind of interesting is the artist collaborative and the food service collaborative. The artist collaborative is several artists leasing a larger space and then setting up a schedule where each one of them has a certain time frame where they put their artwork into the building. Their artwork is there the whole week, but they actually work as like an employee and spend time there and help all the other collaboratives as well. So they're showing off all the artists' work instead of just their own. And that's worked to help with cost value and in the brick and mortar and the way it's been going. The Food and Service Collaborative, we have Hope in Maine, which was opened up a couple of years ago. It's a group where you can actually go into this fraction and just lease out a couple of hours at a time and have warehouse space and refrigeration space where you can test out your product and ship out your product from there. So a lot of these smaller companies have gone there and started there and then worked out where they actually rented out a warehouse after they've gotten popular through the venue of retail and on the internet. So that's been some of the things that have happened in the Warren, East Providence area. Multifamily is always strong. I think it's going to continue to be strong. I think the collaboratives are going to get a little stronger as well. I think that the larger office spaces are going to have to morph into these different smaller collaboratives or splitting up office spaces. Retail, I think the mom and pop retails, a lot of these, so the town and state support. Everybody knows about the PPPs and the support that these small businesses have been having. It's been really a help at helping them keep their doors open. So some of the situations on that also is just the businesses staying open and getting this town support and state support. Towns have been actually doing weekend advertising and setting up weekend tours of all the restaurants or tours of all the artists. That's been helping as well. They've been doing that every month. So a lot of these things have been helping in that particular fraction of the East Bay area. I think that the market is, again, like Tom said, there's been a lack of inventory. That's been happening also in these small towns. And I think that we're going to be strong throughout this year. But again, we're going to probably have to morph one more time when September comes around and the COVID effect may get better. Let's all keep our fingers crossed and pray that that the vaccines and everything are going to create a more healthier environment for us. Jack, if you want to go to the next slide. Okay, they also wanted me to talk about, because I have a mass license as well, they wanted me to talk about North Attleboro. I've been doing a lot in North Attleboro and in the surrounding areas. North Attleboro has seen a large intake of potential development. Right now, there's about 375 units being built in North Attleboro with the aid and support of grants with the city itself, and the federal is helping as well. So that's been really impacting the North Attleboro area. As you know, North Attleboro has a train hub.
Mike, you're muted.
Okay. So also the smaller mom and pops, medical, and all that's been impacted. The residential has been increased all in these areas where there's hubs. And the city and states in these areas are really helping out with grants. The PPPs have been helping, but just the tax incentives. I know that they've been putting a lot of tax incentives in the mayors and the town halls have been really helping with the impact of helping financially to these smaller businesses. And that's pretty much about it. Hopefully that's good information for everybody and we can move to the next person. Have a good evening, everybody.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Sorry about the sound going out there for a minute. Our next presenter is Steve Flachbot from Cushman & Wakefield, Hayes and Sherry. Steve is a graduate of Miami University in Ohio. He joined Hayes and Sherry in 2008 after spending 14 years at Jones Lang LaSalle in suburban Chicago. Steve has consummated transactions across the full array of real estate, working with both national tenants and landlords, including Northwest Mutual, Providence Community Health Centers, and Wexford Science and Technology. Steve is a member of the board of directors of Reichebor. So go ahead, Steve, it's all you.
Thanks, Tom. As previously mentioned, the pandemic has had a diverse impact on different asset classes, and that's definitely true for both Providence and Northern Rhode Island. I'm going to focus on individual markets, both Northern Rhode Island as well as specifically Providence. Several areas have had strong market performance over the past year, which we expect to continue. Investors still have confidence in medical, multifamily, industrial, and pandemic-safe retail. Jack, you've actually gone forward. Yep, stay right there. Any retail with a drive-through or essential retail with easy pickup options have thrived. Industrial was tight before the pandemic, and current demand is steady. The increase in online purchases supports the need for distribution space. The largest issue for industrial, as Tom had mentioned, remains the lack of quality supply on the market for either lease or sale. This has created demand for industrial land, as groups are considering build-to-suits to meet their needs. The lack of inventory is highlighted by Resch, a metal manufacturing firm from Massachusetts, pursuing a 65,000 6-acre build-to-suit in Highland Corporate Park in Woonsocket. There is a lack of viable existing alternatives for their requirement. The weaker markets have been multi-tenant office and non-essential retail, which investors have avoided. While we've considered both to have soft market performance, it's important to note that the bottom hasn't fallen out of any asset class, and the vacancy rates haven't changed as much as you would expect. What's also interesting, there are plenty of examples of both investors and buyers showing confidence in their long-term plans or investments in Providence. Exeter Property Group has continued to move forward with its $90 million development called Emblem 125 at the corner of Clifford and Chestnut. The development will have 248 apartments and roughly 22,000 square feet of ground floor retail on 1.25 acres. The 60 million, 175 room Aloft Hotel will be over 100,000 square feet at the corner of Dorrance and Dyer Street. The hotel plans to have restaurants in both the lobby and on the rooftop. Parcel 6, which is at the corner of Point Street and South Main Street in Fox Point, is currently under development to include 62 residential units and 25,000 square feet of additional commercial space. The project will cost roughly $30 million. Wexford is part of the ownership for roughly 800,000 square feet in the Innovation District, which includes their 2 new developments from 2019, 225 Dyer Street, a 90 million, 200,000 square foot office building, and the 174 unit River House apartment complex, which is adjacent to Davall Square. They've continued this investment in Providence throughout the past year and moved forward with a $12 million redevelopment at Davall Square. The complex has been completely renovated, and it's one of the best stories in Providence right now. The pictures I've included on the background of my slides are from Davall Square's redevelopment, and it's a great example of combining the high ceiling brick and beam loft style of Davall Square with modern high-end finishes. The transformation really is stunning and shows long-term investment confidence in Providence. I'm part of the leasing team for Davall Square. You should definitely tour this property. Call me to set up a tour. So Jack, can you go to the next slide? Most examples of long-term investor confidence have a large component from one of the strong asset classes that I discussed. In the weaker sectors, such as office leasing, uncertainty has been the overriding mindset for tenants. The office market for both Providence and Northern Rhode Island is stagnant and almost seems frozen. Office leases typically have been long-term, multi-year deals, and this has provided some stability for landlords. Even though much of the office space is being underutilized, especially in Providence, the majority of tenants have continued to pay their rent. This isn't to say that small business hasn't been impacted and plenty are struggling. Government stimulus and new lines of income have provided ways to get by. Tenants have been focused on short-term renewals in place. Many of them don't know how big they want their office to be, or if their layouts will be changing to incorporate social distancing with more separations in private offices. Rather than downsizing or closing their offices, most people have been seeking short-term extension, kicking the can down the road, hoping to have a better understanding of their long-term needs after a successful vaccine rollout. Landlords are willing to provide the short-term flexibility to keep cash flow in place, especially considering there aren't many backfill options with few tenants in the market. This stagnant situation has thus far created minimal change in the amount of space on the market. Providence available space increased from 11.3% a year ago to about 12% now, but only a 0.7% increase in availability feels like a small change considering what we've all been living through. Sublease space, which has been a significant issue in larger markets, hasn't been a factor, as neither Providence nor Northern Rhode Island had more than a 0.1% change in sublease space over the past 12 months. In fact, the entire state of Rhode Island has only had office sublease space increase by about 70,000 square feet, which is only a 0.3% increase. Compare that to Boston, which has had over 3.5 million square feet of sublease space hit the market since April of 2020. That's a 3.5% increase. Huge numbers and a huge impact on the Boston office market. This difference highlights how sublease space still has not become a factor in Rhode Island. We have a conservative tenant base and the supply is not overbuilt. Northern Rhode Island has been pretty flat, with available space moving from 7.2% 12 months ago to about 7% now. But there's some definite softness in those numbers. We expect that to change in the next couple of months. This stagnant situation has created a disconnect between tenants and landlords. The world has been completely turned upside down, and tenants expect to be able to find aggressive deal terms. Meanwhile, most buildings have high occupancy rates. Those rates have been maintained by short-term renewals, which has allowed landlords to keep their pre-pandemic rental rates and concessions. In fact, our data shows that office rental rates in Providence actually increased over the past 12 months by about $2 per square foot. However, the market increase has been in the stabilized Class A sector. 10 Memorial, or the IGT building, has continued to set high water marks for rents in the 40s. The rest of the Providence Class A office market will be in the 30s or 40s. There are exceptions, especially in the Class B office market and non-essential retail. With few backfill options, when a tenant is showing the need to close an office or move out, landlords are quickly motivated to provide cost savings, especially some type of free or reduced rent. Rental rates and concessions will definitely be an area to watch throughout the rest of 2021 as tenants begin to have line of sight of their long-term space needs, whether it's changes to their space layout, downsizing based on smaller footprint desires, or just deciding that more employees will be working from home permanently or via flex time. The short-term deals from the past year should start becoming a factor in the latter half of 2021 as well, as a higher volume of lease expirations combined with a hopefully more confident tenant base could make relocations and longer-term commitments more common. Finally, I do want to address retail, which probably has been impacted the most. Retail business has been hit in a polarizing fashion, as anything with a drive-through remains hot. However, for every drive-through business, liquor store, or grocery store that is thriving, there are plenty of locations struggling. Some places just cannot adapt as easily to the increase of online spending or changing Department of Health regulations, as Tom had mentioned. Most of them are hanging on. While the stats do show an increase in vacancy, it's probably not as much as you would expect. Since April of 2020, Providence available retail space increased from 6.8 to 8%. Northern Rhode Island also increased from 8.2 to 9.1%. And Rhode Island as a whole increased from 9.1 to 10.1%. So roughly a 1% increase throughout the market, showing retail has been impacted more than the other sectors, but overall still a low increase as of right now. Retail vacancy has been slowly ticking up for several years, as the consumer trend of buying online isn't a new one, but it has been accelerated by the pandemic. And with that, Jack, can you go to my last slide? Here I've included a list of sale transactions in both Providence and Northern Rhode Island. These are the highest per square foot sales transactions from the last year. I'm not going to go through each and every transaction, but this data really supports which asset classes are performing well. The highest priced Providence sales are either medical related or multifamily. Some of those numbers are great. They're between $200 and $250 per square foot. Northern Rhode Island showed a little bit more variety, with the triple net Walgreens leading the way, followed by some multifamily. But what you don't see high in either of these lists is traditional multi-tenant office and non-essential retail. So with that, I'll send it back over to Tom Sweeney.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate everything. Next up is Karen Coutinho. Karen is with Abbott Properties. She is the managing broker and sole owner of Abbott Properties. Karen is a graduate of the University of Rhode Island and is a licensed attorney. She joined Abbott Properties in 2010 and is currently the 2021 president-elect of Ricobor, and also serves as the vice chairman of the Narragansett Historic Commission. Karen?
Hello, everyone. I have a wide range of geographic area to cover for you. I've been asked to talk about the Cranston area. I've been asked to talk about the Warwick area, as well as all of South County. So I'll start with South County, which is the smallest of these areas. And in terms of the office market, to give you a sense of perspective, there's about 2.2 million square feet of office property in all of Washington County. Now, if you compare that against the 4.7 million square feet that are in Warwick alone, you can see that we're not dealing with a lot of office issues in South County. Most of the office spaces in South County are smaller operations. We don't have a lot of big office buildings, so we don't have the challenges like they have in Providence and some of the other urban areas. Office space seems to be doing pretty well. Some of the larger spaces on Post Road and Quaker Lane are seeing higher vacancies, but in terms of the smaller spaces, we're seeing very low vacancies in the range of 3.7%. Rents have actually increased over the last year and over historical averages at 4.3%, which says that there's some confidence in the market down here in the office sectors. And one of the things that I think is driving the prices is the fact that there's low inventory in the office area. On the sales side, sales have been pretty consistent. There's been a small increase in sales. Investors and owner occupants seem to have a lot of confidence in buying these small office buildings in South County. And I think that's driven by the low vacancy factors, the stable rents, and sellers taking advantage of the low inventory and the fact that people are ready to buy from these people. Now, what have the sales been? We don't have huge sales. You saw some great numbers when we were looking at up in Providence. Most of the sales of office space down here are in the range of 400 to a top of 800,000. There's been a couple of high sales, but those are mostly up in the Quonset area or in the northern part of North Kingstown. So I think what those do is if you lump them all together, they skew the numbers. We're really a small market for office. In terms of retail, once again, I'm surprised on how well we're doing here. And I think that's because we don't have a lot of big, huge malls or big developments that are facing the challenges that the cities are. Our big box stores like Walmart's and Home Depot and the supermarkets are all doing very, very well. Small retailers seem to be surprisingly nimble in their ability to adapt to the changing conditions that the COVID virus is presenting them with on a day-to-day basis. They're getting good support from the government in terms of monies, and I think because they're small, they are able to be nimbler. So we're not seeing a lot of vacant storefronts on the small business side, on the retail side. When we do see them, when you do see a storefront shut down or even an office, I can tell you anecdotally that those people are still keeping their leases, they're still keeping their spaces. And that's because I think there's optimism in terms of where we're going to go with the coronavirus. But I think there's also an acknowledgement that there's no inventory out there. And if they do give up their small retail space or their office space, they're never going to be able to find anything else once we do come out of COVID. In terms of industrial, we have a small industrial market. On the leasing side, low vacancy factors. The numbers are in line with what we're seeing for the rest of the state. A lot of demand, not a lot of inventory. Most of them are contractor type spaces. We don't have big industrial spaces in Washington County. It's going for about $50 a square foot on the sales side. So that's essentially South County. In terms of the sales side on retail, we've got a huge range of values of anywhere between $375 per square foot down to $89 per square foot. And that huge variation in numbers is due to the fact that we're lumping Ashaway together with North Kingstown. So the numbers don't jive in the same way they would if you look at a discrete market like Warwick or Providence. So that's it for South County. Now, Warwick, a market that I'm very familiar with because that's where my office is located and that's where we do the bulk of our commercial work, again, seems to be doing pretty well. On the office side, it's the large corporate buildings that are empty. Vacancy factors are 50% or more. We don't see these people coming back anytime soon until we get some type of resolution of the coronavirus situation. Smaller offices seem to be doing better. Vacancy factors are a little bit higher than they were, around 8%. The historical averages are 6.8%. But when I look at that number in the context of what's happened with Corona, I actually think it's not so bad. The smaller offices seem to be more nimble in adapting. My own office, for example, we managed to stay open. We alternate our times coming in. We have people work home part of the time, come into the office when they need to. And our office, like many of the small offices up in the Warwick area, are able to stay open and are hanging on to their locations. In terms of new construction, everything's come to a screeching halt in Warwick. There is no construction. There's one very small development that's in progress that's not going to significantly affect inventory. And so if we do have a turnaround at some point and there is a demand and people do come back, we could find ourselves hurting in the Warwick area because there just isn't anything new coming in. Average prices in Warwick on sales, pretty much where they were in the past. We still have some sales going on. I can tell you that there's a lot more stuff under contract right now. And at the beginning of 2021 that went under contract, at the end of 2020, that once again, I think is starting to show some confidence in the market coming back. Retail, I think it's the same all the way around. The larger spaces are empty. The smaller retails are doing okay. Sales have slowed. Prices have gone down on the retail side, but still at 170 per square foot on the retail side sales. That number is above what I think the average is for the Providence market. So again, we seem to be hanging on. Developers are not putting any new retail space on the market. And the areas that we had hoped in Warwick would start to see some development, for example, the intermodal zone, which has been, on the drawing board for 20 years, and we were hoping to get some traction out of that. All of that's come to a screeching halt, and we don't see that coming back for a long, long time. Industrial, now that's one area that Warwick is doing very, very well in. We have a low vacancy factor of 2.8%. There is more demand for industrial space than we can possibly deliver. There are no new deliveries coming in on the horizon. We are not getting any more. And we have 2 and 3 people knocking on our doors for industrial space, and there's just no place to put them. The amount of industrial space in Warwick has actually contracted over the last 10 years. We're seeing, as I said, we're seeing high demand and we're unable to service that demand. Cranston. And to be frank, this is not a market that I am super familiar with, but I was asked to cover it. And from the numbers that I have seen and the statistics, it seems like Cranston seems to be struggling a little bit more in all of its markets when you compare it to Warwick, for example. Their vacancies are up on the office side. They have a lot of larger corporate vacancies, some as high as 50%. They've seen smaller rent increases in some of the other areas. We've been in the 4s to 4.9%. They've only seen increases in about 3%. So they seem to be having more problems than the city next door, Warwick. On retail, rents seem to be pretty good, up 5.5%. Some of the larger retail places like Chapel View, though, are seeing 25% vacancies. And again, there's no new construction coming up. The price per square foot, though, interestingly, on the retail side is about $170 per square foot, making it on par with Warwick, which means it's still higher than what we're seeing up in the Providence area. On the industrial side, it very much mirrors what's going on in Warwick. There's very high demand, very low inventory. Their vacancy rates are 2%, and they are actually losing significant amount of industrial space in Cranston through demolition of a lot of these older properties. So they are feeling the crunch on the industrial. On the industrial, how does that affect people out there looking? Right now, there's a lot of people trying to figure out how to retool their businesses, looking actually to expand into their industrial space, and we're not able to meet those demands in either Warwick or Cranston. So that's basically it. Lots of numbers and figures. My take on the coronavirus, I mean, certainly it was an economic disruptor. It certainly kind of took our lives and brought them to a screeching halt. There's been uncertainty from day to day with the ever-changing rules about what you can do and what you can't do and how you can open and how you don't open. But I have to say to myself that what will happen when uncertainty is replaced by certainty and predictability? And I think a lot of that is going to be a function of effective vaccines and the confidence that comes from effective vaccines. The news that we're seeing in all of the newspapers these days is these vaccines are effective. This morning, for example, the CDC said if you do get the 2 doses of the vaccine and you are exposed to someone with coronavirus, you no longer have to quarantine. I think as more and more of that confidence comes into play, I think we're going to start to go back to normal. And I would hypothesize that it could happen very, very quickly. I think as quickly as we turned to the left, we could turn as quickly to the right. And my reason for saying that is not only real estate related, but has to do with psychology and sociology. I mean, we are social animals by nature. We don't like to be alone. And even though many of us said, great, I don't have to get up today and put on my work clothes, I can work from my desk at my kitchen table, which is now my new desk. That's not in our nature. And we're all becoming tired of that. So this idea of people no longer going to offices, I think we will be back in offices. People will be back in restaurants. In fact, it's already happening in some parts of our country, whether you agree or disagree with the reasons, we're starting to see it. And so I'm actually optimistic that if we can get some confidence in the vaccine situation, I think we could pivot as quickly in a positive direction as we did with what happened when the coronavirus started. The other reason that I think people are going to go back to cities and go back to offices is because of efficiency factors. You can tell yourself as much as you want that you're going to work as hard from home, but you're not going to do it. I think it takes a very special person and probably someone of a younger generation to have the discipline to sit down in front of a computer alone. But when I talk to people that I know in Boston, for example, owner of a law firm that pays $35,000 a month for office space at Post Office Square, he can't wait to get his people back to work because his efficiency is way, way down. So I think we're going to kind of see that across the board. I'd also point out to history, whenever we've had disruptors in US history, we've always pivoted the other way. So after your 2 wars, you had the Roaring 20s, you had some of the most productive economic time after World War II. Also, I'll go back to 9/11. I mean, that's something that happened in our lifetime. After those planes hit the towers, we thought it was going to be the demise of the city, the demise of the office building, but within 1 year, we were back to normal. So I have a very optimistic view. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Karen. Up next, before I introduce Steve, again, if you have any questions, and I see some of you are taking advantage of it, please use the chat function so that we can answer whatever questions you have in the amount of time we have. Next up, we have Steve Kirby of Kirby Real Estate. Steve is the principal broker and co-founder of Kirby Real Estate. He has been successfully leasing and selling properties primarily on Aquidneck Island over the last 35 years. Steve has held leadership roles in various realtor organizations and numerous civic groups. Steve graduated from Portsmouth Abbey and then from there went to Providence College. Steve is a past president of the Rhode Island Commercial Appraisal Board and was the Realtor of the Year multiple times. He currently serves on the board of directors of Ricobor. Take it away, Steve.
Thanks a lot, Tom. I kind of agree with Karen's assumptions about positive things coming forward. Down here in Newport, we're seeing a lot of people who just can't wait to get this going, and talking to a lot of special event people who have been holding on to survive. They're essentially completely sold out from August on. So all of the activities and all the things that we've been putting off, I think are going to come rearing back at us once we get this under control. So I think because of that positive attitude, what we're seeing with the different segments I'm going to explain to you is we're in pretty good shape, and much, much better shape than I would have thought. So I'll go through each segment with you and try and lay it out. So Jack, the first slide. Okay, the office market has been very interesting. The small market, small spaces have been probably stronger than ever. It's a large part because locals and entrepreneurs, you know, if you live here, you got to get up, you got to work. A lot of people have also just, you know, they're cooped up in the house, so they're, you know, going out and renting small spaces. Some of the bigger firms are renting more spaces to rent, you know, just get their people spread out. We've also had some, you know, unique offerings, such as people renting office suites and turning them into private schools for their kids. That's happened numerous times. And it's a lot of it is we've benefited, especially in this area, from a lot of people moving here, and the residential market has skyrocketed. But because people are moving here from other cities, they quite often get here and then are starting up remote offices from their main operations. So they may have a big thing in Manhattan, but they'll rent 1,000 square feet here just to have a local presence. The stuff that's totally vulnerable is the big office components, anything that's corporate. We do a lot of defense work here, things that require high intensity secret work. Those people still have to go to work, still have to go to the office. But anything other than that, they're not showing up. So the corporate type stuff is weak. They're still paying the rent. It's just that you go into a parking lot and there's nobody there. The co-working spaces, the open air concepts, that has just stopped. A lot of those people have rented the smaller spaces, so it's just kind of a mixture and a shifting of priorities. One of the biggest things is our vacancy rates are still very low. There's not a lot of demand for big spaces, but I think our communities are actually in significant danger from growth, because if one of you calls up with a great tenant that needs 15,000 square feet or more, we can't accommodate you. And so that is a huge negative for the growth of the area. Okay, Jack, next one, please. The retail situation is fairly similar. All of this, usually right now, between January 1st and St. Patrick's Day, we do a ton of retail leasing. This year is going to be off because we don't have much to lease. All of the small spaces are getting gobbled up. There's very few spots left at this point, and that's very early in the retail cycle. The smaller nationals that are in the market now are reconfiguring, but there are no new nationals coming in. So if you're here, you're taking advantage of it, you're trying to figure out what works, you move down the street, but it's more of a shuffling versus a growth scenario. The stuff that's doing well is service related and other retail that's, has a presence that takes care of service and or web aspects. The vulnerable stuff is gyms and fitness situations have been dramatically hurt, mostly because of the governmental restrictions, and the larger corporate type stuff they're the ones who should be nervous. As far as our community goes, our lack of space and a lack of possibilities is the future concern going forward. Okay, Jack. Next area I want to talk about is hospitality. I've been trying to talk about what is strong. There's nothing strong about hospitality. The restaurants that are doing well have been the ones who can pivot. They're the ones who have figured out how to do deliveries, how to cut their costs, how to, do well with takeout. The community has been amazingly supportive of these groups, and they're just trying to help them get by. So aggressive cost cutting and reduced hours. A restaurant might close for 2 weeks to retool. Well, this year they might close for a month. The people who are in the special event world, who are planning weddings, planning corporate events, those folks are probably the ones who have taken it the hardest. And we just hope that, they get by. They've been amazingly helped by the PPP, the Take It Outside program. If it wasn't for those programs, this industry would have been sunk and it would have taken many, many years to recover from. Probably one of the most interesting things is some of our hotels are now, dorms for Salve Regina and other colleges. So it's all the ability to pivot is what is, the success. All right, Jack, let's move on to industrial. So industrial market is the strongest part right now. Part of that is we don't have much of it. The other part is we've got this phenomenon where these car enthusiasts and boat enthusiasts have taken up all of the major warehousing buildings, and they're now car museums, they're boat indoor storage things. So they have just chewed up everything. We don't have a single tradesman unit available in Newport County or at least on Aquidneck Island. And that is a very, very dangerous situation. So if there's a young plumbing operation starting out, if somebody, is in the marine trades, they cannot find space. So yes, it's great that we're strong. It's great that when that industry is not, or that segment is not suffering, but our growth is being dramatically hurt by that. That's further exacerbated by very poor zoning standards and kind of a constant residence versus commercial friction. So that needs to be figured out. That's probably the biggest thing, is just we need more capacity to move forward. The sales have been strong, much stronger than they probably should have been. Some of the retail things are going in the $300 to $500 foot range. We've had several restaurant transactions happening. A large part of that is because of the great financing. Our good friends at Ocean State Business Development with the SBA 504 plan, they've made all the difference on numerous transactions. They helped us sell a marina and a bunch of restaurants. So things are still moving forward. So that's pretty much what's going on in Newport County.
Thanks, Steve. We do have, again, I ask if anybody has any questions, please put them into the chat section. We do have a couple of questions that have been put forth. And I'll kind of open it up to the panel on the first one. One of our people asked, can you be specific as to what type of industrial space tenants are looking for? Why don't we start on Aquidneck? Why don't we go around the loop in reverse order? Steve, you can give us your 2 cents and then we'll go to all the other panelists.
Sure. I have defense firms that need clean rooms. They need lab areas. They can't find them. We have marine trade types that work, either in very high tech marine electronics or even just boat refinishing and things like that. They can't find it. And the trades, I just feel bad if there's a 32-year-old plumber who wants to start his own firm, he's not doing it because he can't find the space. So
Okay.
that's this
Thanks,
area.
Steve. Karen, how about Cranston?
Cranston and Warwick, I would echo what Steve was saying. Trade people are looking for space. There's just none available. We've had like private utility contractors looking for space. That's one group. Interestingly, some small specialty manufacturing people. Interesting. One group that constructs all of the gaming tables for all of the casinos around the country, or small specialty motorcycle manufacturing of parts, things like that. Hard to find spaces for these people, but primarily tradespeople.
Steve Flotchbot, how about Warwick, Providence and North?
Yeah, I would definitely say trades and then secondary distribution. But local contractors, there's still a heavy demand for space. And then as far as distribution goes, just companies trying to get as close to their consumers as possible, whether it be other businesses or actual households, so that their deliveries can be shortened up. That last. So, and then what I think will be really interesting to watch in the north, as Massachusetts continues to have high-priced industrial space and very tight industrial space, the built-to-suits in northern Rhode Island become much more prevalent in the coming years. And let's hope so. But that's something to watch.
Okay. And Mike Alves.
Sure. In the East Bay area, again, the trades, those small, warehouses, the smaller 1,000 to 1,500 square foot spaces with office spaces, those are really being sought out after. Interestingly enough, in the Attleboro area, the marijuana growers are still out there looking for spaces in their industrial location, because in a lot of the areas in Massachusetts, they're only allowing you in the M1 zones to be able to do the distribution and the growing of the marijuana. So that's pretty much the two spots that are coming up with us.
Yeah, and I could throw in from a statewide perspective, the lack of high bay warehouse distribution, as everybody has kind of commented on. I do find it funny that right now there are 3 significant distribution warehouses being proposed. One in Johnston's known as Project Schooner. Gee, I can't imagine what a 1 million square foot warehouse in Johnston would be used for right off of a highway. And then there's the one at the airport, which is another 500,000 square feet. And there's another one in Pawtucket, all end of line and close to end of line projects. It seems that we're finally getting to that verge where we always had, as Steve said, as pricing in Massachusetts gets more expensive, we're finally seem to be getting to closer to the tipping point where construction starts to make sense and people are starting to do it, because literally Resch, as Steve Flotchbot mentioned, is a great example. They couldn't find a building, so they have to build one. So another question we have, with everything going on in the market, the impact of COVID, what are your thoughts on the repurposing of space, and are cities and towns showing any openness to rezone to, free up some more space for that type of development? And I'll go in reverse order. Mike Alves, why don't you give us your perspective first?
Okay, so I know in Warren and the Bristol, East Providence area, some of the zoning changes are a lot of the downtown locations that have the retail below and the offices above. They're allowing to change those offices into residential, because the residentials are more sought after. As I said when I was speaking, also the collaboratives are really happening now because of that, because of COVID. And then in the north Attleboro and Attleboro areas, it's just basically the mayor and the councils just getting together and changing zonings for some collaborative office spaces. They're also really helping with the smaller 1,500 to 2,500, getting grants and for the small businesses to start up in these downtown locations.
Okay, Steve Flatchbach.
Yeah, I would say the first thing that just comes to mind is the big box retailers. As an example, we represent space at Providence Place Mall, and we have a 30,000 square foot plus box that would traditionally have gone to a retail store. We're going to pursue classroom space, we're going to pursue office space, medical space. So there's a lot of flexibility, I think, in how a big box could be repurposed. And then the second thing comes to mind is that I think that office landlords who have been hesitant or wanting to keep their buildings office only versus also allowing medical and quasi-medical tenants to occupy it are going to pursue medical. Medical is such a strong environment right now, both in leasing demand and the kind of cash flow that it creates, as well as the building values that it creates. So I think medical is just going to be continued to be pursued.
Okay, Karen.
I'm not familiar with Cranston. In terms of Warwick, I haven't heard of anything formally on the books in terms of zoning changes. I can tell you that the zoning board in Warwick is always been traditionally flexible, taking the if it makes sense approach. They're going to make it happen, and I'm assuming that they're going to continue on in that way. In terms of Washington County, we're talking about, I don't know, 7 or 8 towns. In my own town of Narragansett, there's a whole new zoning set of zoning ordinances that are being proposed, but those are more directed towards the kind of big residential development that they're trying to stop or delay or change.
And before I go to Steve, I really do think, since Karen mentioned the Warwick Zoning Board, her partner, who is no longer with us, just give a brief statement to say that Don Morash, who was the chairman of the Warwick Zoning Board, was the epitome of that type of zoning board chairman who would look at a project and make sure if it made sense, then they generally, if it had lots of opposition, it was generally done. But just thinking about him today. So now, Steve Kirby, how about a Quidnick? Are they doing anything to free up space?
Yeah, there's been really no redevelopment of spaces, mostly because they're full, and also because the big box type spaces are actually getting more rent than office space. So there's really no financial reason to do it. On the municipal side, most of our governments are not all very proactive about change. Also, being on mostly islands, we don't really have that much space. We also have very strong land trusts in this area. So we have very, very happy cows, but we don't have much growth. So
Doing fine. You want
I would make this remark. I think from a public policy point of view, I think it would be dangerous to make changes, to broad zoning changes to respond to what we're hoping is a a very discrete kind of situation. I think from a public policy point of view, I don't think you're going to have a lot of zoning boards that are going to make broad changes to any type of zoning ordinance.
And I would agree with you there, Karen. Kind of going off of that, someone has asked, has there been any impact on values of waterfront properties and properties within waterfront flood zone areas, specifically commercial and or industrial? Steve Kirby, we're going to go back to you because you're on an island.
Yeah. Surprisingly, that hasn't really made a big difference. It's still because it's such a limited supply, and there's been a lot of trophy buying in the area. Some of the floodplain areas, such as Connell Highway in Newport, that has stymied some development, but it's more because of the probably even higher cost of construction in those kind of floodplain areas.
Steve, a quick question is off the last question, is the North End redevelopment, will that present any type of space that you could use that could fill the need on Aquidneck?
It's kind of a math thing. Hopefully it will. The big questions will be what happens like it did in the 195 project. So the state owns all the land. Newport, doesn't own anything. So whether the state sells it to Newport to develop or not. But one of the quandaries is office space in this area really only goes for about $14, $15 a foot. And when it costs $250 a foot to build an office building, the math just doesn't work. So it's going to be a very interesting situation.
Okay. Karen, again, probably specifically to Warwick, has there been any impact on waterfront?
Not that I'm saying, no.
Okay, either Steve or Mike, Steve Flashbot or Mike Alves, any thoughts on this?
Well, waterfront in the small towns have been drastically changing because, like I said, we had that tourist and mills. That's really creating a very kind of a dispute in the area. You have a lot of fishery that's along Water Street there that a lot of people want to change because it's older fishermen that have a lot of spaces that are very run down, and they want to try to change the zoning over there so that we can do something different over there. And you have a lot of, it's small town politics. I don't think you're ever going to change it. It's always going to stay in that kind of rustic kind of look along the water over there.
And I would say that waterfront properties are definitely in high demand. Could I say that the pandemic increased their values? I think their values were already pretty high. I think the pandemic might have increased some people looking at them just because they're for the most part in demand and safer as far as creating businesses there. But I don't know if values have actually been increased because of that.
That is all of the questions I have had that have been sent in. If anyone who's on the Zoom would like to, unmute themselves and ask a question or hold up their hand or any of those things, I'm really not sure how that works. But if there are any questions out there, please unmute yourself, identify yourself, and we'll see if we can answer the question. Well, Jack, do you see anyone raising their hand or unmuting themselves? Because I only see a limited amount on the screen.
I do not.
Okay. Well, I guess that's it. I'd like to thank our panelists for joining us tonight. I'd like to thank everybody who joined us on the Zoom. You can watch this again on the Reichebor website. If you have any interest in becoming a member of Reichebor or becoming an affiliate, please reach out to any member of the panel, myself or Jack. Jack, if you can repeat the website again for more information. And if there's nothing else, I thank everybody for joining us. And Jack, if you can just give that website.
Yep, our website is www.ricabor.realtor.
And if that's it, I thank everybody again. Everyone have a wonderful night. And I will tell you, as we said, this is our series. We're really trying to do this as a monthly basis. We have just had Rick Mandel from Sage Environmental has decided to join us next month to talk about environmental issues impacting commercial industrial properties. We haven't confirmed the date, but generally it has been the second Wednesday. An email will be going out very shortly to confirm that. But please join us then. And again, thank you, everybody, and everyone have a good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Night all.